Imagine a sanctuary, a place designed to be a refuge for families fighting for the lives of their newborns. A neonatal unit filled with the soft hum of machines, the rhythmic beeping of heart monitors, and the whispered prayers of parents clinging to hope with every breath their baby takes. Now, imagine that within this space of healing and care, something was terribly wrong. Between 2015 and 2016 at the Countess of Chester Hospital in England, an alarming number of babies began to collapse unexpectedly. Some survived, others did not. At the center of this unfolding tragedy stood Lucy Letby, a nurse entrusted with the care of these fragile lives. She worked alongside doctors and nurses, holding the hands of grieving parents, offering words of comfort and meticulously documenting the unexplained tragedies. But as the deaths and near-fatal incidents mounted, unsettling questions emerged. Why were so many of these collapses happening during her shifts? Why were the medical anomalies baffling even the most experienced specialists? And how could someone who appeared so compassionate and dedicated be linked to such devastating losses? This is the story of Lucy Letby, a case that would grip a nation, expose deep failures within a trusted institution, and leave families searching for answers. A nurse, trusted with the smallest and most vulnerable among us, accused of the unthinkable. How could this have gone unnoticed for so long? And what did investigators uncover that changed everything? Lucy Letby grew up in Hereford, England, a quiet city of peaceful streets and close-knit communities. She was the only child of devoted parents who nurtured her ambitions from an early age. Friends and neighbors described her as polite, friendly, and well-behaved. Academically gifted, Lucy excelled in her studies, earning respect for her diligence and focus. She had a clear dream from childhood to help others by becoming a nurse. Driven by this goal, she enrolled at the University of Chester, specializing in neonatal care, a field that required patience, skill, and unwavering compassion. After graduating, she secured a position in the neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital, one of England's leading medical facilities. Her colleagues saw her as a dedicated and reliable nurse, calm under pressure, confident in emergencies. Parents, too, placed their trust in her. She was the reassuring presence they needed in their darkest moments. In a profession where mistakes could have life-altering consequences, Lucy Letby appeared to be someone who could be trusted with the hospital's most fragile patients. The neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital was a place where miracles and tragedies unfolded side by side. It was designed to care for premature and critically ill infants, tiny patients who required constant, meticulous attention from skilled doctors and nurses. The sterile air was filled with the steady hum of life support machines, the soft whir of ventilators, and the rhythmic beeps of monitors tracking every heartbeat. It was a world of urgency, where medical staff worked long shifts under immense pressure, united in their mission to save lives. For parents, it was a place of both hope and heartache. They sat by their baby's bedside, watching, waiting, celebrating every small movement, every breath as a fragile victory. They believed their children were in the safest hands possible. But some of them would come to learn that their worst nightmares were about to become reality. A premature twin, baby A, had been stabilized but suddenly collapsed without warning. Despite desperate resuscitation efforts, the infant died, leaving doctors and parents searching for answers. Then came baby B, the twin sibling, who also suffered an unexplained collapse, but miraculously survived. This tragic pattern continued. Baby C, baby D, and baby E all experienced sudden, baffling deteriorations that tore families apart and left medical professionals stunned. Investigations were launched, yet no clear medical explanation emerged. The losses weighed heavily on doctors, nurses, and especially the grieving parents. But no one could have imagined the grim truth that lay ahead. The trust parents placed in the neonatal team, particularly in Lucy Letby, was about to be shattered in ways beyond belief. Within the walls of the Countess of Chester Hospital, an unsettling realization was beginning to take shape. While tragedies in a neonatal ward were not uncommon, what was happening here felt unprecedented. The deaths were occurring too frequently, defying usual medical explanations, and one name kept appearing in every case: Lucy Letby. As the months passed, a disturbing pattern emerged. It began in June 2015 with baby A, a premature twin who, though fragile, had been recovering well. Without warning, the baby collapsed and could not be saved. Just days later, baby B suffered a similar medical emergency, but managed to survive. The incidents left parents devastated and staff deeply unsettled. Still, at the time, they were seen as heartbreaking misfortunes rather than something more sinister. But then, more collapses followed. Baby C, a premature infant showing signs of improvement, suddenly deteriorated and died. Baby D, another vulnerable newborn, passed away soon after. Baby E suffered a catastrophic internal bleed and could not be saved. Case after case, the same horrific pattern repeated. Each tragedy seemed isolated until hospital staff noticed one common factor. Lucy Letby was present at nearly every collapse. By 2016, the number of unexplained medical emergencies had escalated. Babies who had been stable would suddenly and inexplicably deteriorate. Despite the expertise of the medical team, no clear cause could be found. Post-mortem examinations yielded inconclusive or perplexing results. Slowly, suspicions began to grow. Investigations later revealed chilling details. Prosecutors alleged that Lucy Letby deliberately harmed the infants in her care. Some babies had been injected with air, leading to fatal air embolisms and cardiac arrests. Others had been poisoned with insulin, causing their blood sugar levels to drop to dangerous levels. Some feeding tubes had been tampered with, triggering catastrophic medical crises. These acts, hidden within the everyday routines of a busy neonatal unit, went unnoticed for months. Each death had initially seemed like an unfortunate but explainable tragedy. Yet as investigators looked deeper, horrifying patterns emerged. The babies targeted were often the most fragile, premature newborns, or those already battling for survival. Their parents, trusting in the hospital's care, never suspected the nightmare unfolding before them. What should have been a place of healing became a scene of unimaginable betrayal. The events at the Countess of Chester Hospital would soon unravel into a national scandal, leaving an indelible mark on the medical community and forever changing the perception of trust in neonatal care. The unexpected losses sent shockwaves through the hospital, affecting not only the grieving families but also the medical staff. Trained to save lives, nurses and doctors now faced an unsettling pattern of failures. They began to question everything: their methods, instincts, and even themselves. How could so many tragedies strike in such a short period? And why did they seem to happen during Lucy Letby's shifts? Despite the growing unease among her colleagues, Letby remained a constant presence in the neonatal unit. She cared for the hospital's most fragile patients and comforted grieving families. For nearly 2 years, she was at the center of these unexplained incidents, her position unchallenged even as doubts took root. The hospital became a place of fear and uncertainty, with staff quietly sharing their concerns while others struggled to believe such suspicions could be true. Yet, the tragedies continued. Babies kept collapsing, lives kept being lost, families kept searching for answers. A haunting question loomed over the Countess of Chester Hospital. Could someone within their own ranks be responsible for these devastating events? When the answer finally came, it would shock the world. By 2016, the unsettling pattern in the neonatal unit had become impossible for senior doctors to ignore. Dr. Stephen Brary and other consultants grew increasingly alarmed as they noticed a disturbing correlation. Lucy Letby, once regarded as a dedicated and compassionate nurse, was present during nearly every unexplained collapse or death. What began as a faint suspicion quickly became a pressing concern, one the doctors could no longer stay silent about. Dr. Brary and his colleagues presented their findings to hospital management, providing data that linked the incidents to Letby's shifts. But the hospital's response was far from decisive. Administrators hesitated, wary of the legal and reputational consequences of accusing a trusted nurse of such grave misconduct. The mere suggestion that a staff member could be harming patients threatened to tarnish the hospital's standing and spark public outrage. Rather than suspending Letby or launching an immediate investigation, the hospital reassigned her to administrative duties, removing her from direct patient care. This move was intended to mitigate risk without drawing attention to the crisis. But the damage was already done. Families were left grieving, medical staff were haunted by unanswered questions, and the hospital continued to struggle with the weight of its inaction. It wasn't until 2017, after months of mounting internal pressure, that law enforcement became involved. Cheshire Police launched Operation Hummingbird, a full-scale investigation into the unexplained collapses and deaths in the neonatal unit. Detectives meticulously reviewed medical records, analyzed patterns, and interviewed hospital staff, determined to uncover the truth. Forensic analysis revealed alarming irregularities. Investigators found evidence suggesting air had been deliberately injected into IV lines, causing fatal air embolisms. Unexplained insulin spikes pointed to intentional poisoning. Feeding tubes appeared to have been tampered with, leading to sudden medical crises. Each discovery painted an increasingly sinister picture, one that pointed not to tragic medical complications, but to deliberate harm. The investigation took a chilling turn when police searched Letby's home. Among her personal belongings, they found a series of handwritten notes. One message stood out, sending shockwaves through the investigative team. "I am evil, I did this." While this note alone wasn't definitive proof, it became a disturbing focal point of the case. It suggested a shocking level of awareness and acknowledgement of the harm inflicted. Despite the mounting evidence, building a case against Letby would prove to be anything but straightforward. The crimes had occurred within the controlled environment of a hospital, where every death, every medical crisis, and every decision left a trail of documentation. Yet, unraveling the truth behind the pattern of deaths in the neonatal unit would require investigators to confront a possibility almost too horrific to believe. In a specialized medical environment where complications and fatalities were not uncommon, prosecutors faced the immense challenge of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that these incidents were the result of deliberate action rather than medical misfortune. The complexity of neonatal care, combined with the absence of direct witnesses, made securing justice particularly difficult. Meanwhile, the families of the affected babies remained unaware of the full extent of the investigation. Their grief over losing a child was compounded by the growing suspicion that those entrusted with protecting their loved ones had failed them in the most unimaginable way. A haunting question lingered. How had this been allowed to happen, and why was it not stopped sooner? As police continued their work, the case began to take shape, exposing systemic failures and lapses in oversight that had allowed these tragedies to persist. The pursuit of justice would take years, but one thing was becoming increasingly clear. What had unfolded at the Countess of Chester Hospital was no ordinary series of medical emergencies. It was the beginning of a criminal case that would shock a nation and demand answers to the unthinkable. The trial of Lucy Letby began in October 2022 at Manchester Crown Court, marking the culmination of years of painstaking investigation and mounting speculation. The courtroom became the stage where the full weight of the allegations against her would be laid bare, as prosecutors and defense lawyers presented their cases before a captivated and horrified public. This was a trial unlike any other in modern British history, one that exposed the devastating consequences of betrayal in an institution meant to represent care and healing. The prosecution presented its case with chilling precision, relying on detailed medical records, expert testimony, and Letby's own writings. They alleged that she had deliberately harmed the infants in her care, leading to the deaths of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 6 others. The methods, they claimed, were calculated: air injected into IV lines, lethal doses of insulin administered, and feeding tubes tampered with in ways that caused catastrophic damage. One of the most significant pieces of evidence was a handwritten note found in Letby's home during a police search. On it, she had written the words, "I am evil, I did this." Prosecutors argued that this was a direct admission of guilt, a chilling glimpse into her awareness of her actions. The combination of medical evidence and this damning note painted a picture of premeditation and intent that the prosecution hoped the jury could not ignore. The defense, however, mounted a vigorous argument, insisting that Letby was being scapegoated for systemic failings at the hospital. They highlighted the immense pressure on the neonatal unit, where staff were stretched thin and equipment often failed. The defense pointed to previous concerns about the hospital's ability to handle critical cases, suggesting that these factors, rather than Letby's actions, were responsible for the tragic deaths. They portrayed her as a dedicated nurse, wrongfully accused and subjected to a trial by public opinion. Throughout the trial, emotional testimonies from parents of the victims underscored the devastating human cost of the events under scrutiny. Many described the joy of their child's birth, only to have their lives shattered by sudden, unexplained collapses. They recounted placing their trust in the neonatal team, including Lucy Letby, believing their babies were in the safest hands possible. The raw grief in their voices made the reality of their losses all the more harrowing. Another pivotal moment came when text messages between Letby and her colleagues were presented as evidence. Initially appearing innocuous, these messages provided insight into her mindset. Some showed interactions on the days of the tragedies, while others depicted her seeking sympathy for the distress caused by the deaths. Prosecutors argued that these messages reflected a calculated attempt to maintain an appearance of innocence while continuing her harmful actions. As the trial progressed, tension in the courtroom escalated. Medical experts testified, explaining how the likelihood of these incidents being purely coincidental was statistically improbable. Analyses demonstrated that the rate of collapses and deaths during Letby's shifts far exceeded what could be expected in even the most critical neonatal units. With each new piece of evidence, the prosecution's case grew stronger, reinforcing their argument that these were deliberate acts, not random misfortunes. The public reacted with outrage and disbelief, struggling to comprehend how such acts could have been committed by someone entrusted with the care of the most vulnerable infants. In sentencing Letby, the judge described her actions as a gross betrayal of trust and exceptional in their cruelty. She was given a rare sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, ensuring that she would spend the rest of her life behind bars. For the families, the sentence provided some measure of closure, though the scars of their losses would never fully heal. The trial and its outcome left a lasting mark on the public conscience, raising urgent questions about oversight in medical institutions, the mechanisms for identifying misconduct, and the systemic failures that had allowed such horrors to continue unchecked for so long. For many, the case of Lucy Letby was a stark and haunting reminder that even in places designed for healing, the most unthinkable betrayals can occur. The case of Lucy Letby sent shockwaves through the medical community and society at large, leaving behind a trail of questions, lessons, and unimaginable grief. Her actions not only exposed the horrific consequences of a betrayal of trust, but also highlighted systemic failures within the healthcare system that allowed her crimes to continue unchecked for so long. One of the most pressing lessons from this case is the urgent need for stronger safeguards and oversight within hospitals. The reluctance of the Countess of Chester Hospital to act decisively in response to early warnings revealed a troubling fear of legal and reputational damage. Senior doctors, including Dr. Stephen Breary, had raised concerns about a disturbing pattern of deaths and collapses occurring during Letby's shifts. Yet, these warnings were not met with urgency. Instead of launching a thorough investigation, the hospital reassigned Letby to administrative duties, allowing the tragedies to persist. This hesitancy underscored a broader issue: the need for healthcare institutions to prioritize patient safety above all else, even when exposing internal wrongdoing comes with potential fallout. In response to this case, experts have called for reforms that empower hospital staff to report concerns without fear of retaliation. Whistleblower protections and clear pathways for addressing suspicions are essential to preventing future tragedies. Additionally, hospitals must reevaluate how they handle performance reviews and investigations into anomalies, ensuring that patterns like those linked to Letby are identified and addressed much earlier. The tragedy extended beyond the victims' families, impacting the medical staff who had tirelessly worked to save those babies. Many of Letby's former colleagues struggled to reconcile the betrayal, questioning how such actions could have gone unnoticed in a unit built on teamwork and trust. The psychological toll on staff and the broader community has been immense, leaving many to wonder how trust in the profession can be rebuilt. As the nation reflects on the horrors that unfolded at the Countess of Chester Hospital, one question lingers. How can we ensure such atrocities never happen again? The case of Lucy Letby stands as a stark reminder that vigilance, accountability, and transparency are not optional in healthcare. They are essential. It is not enough to assume that safeguards are in place. They must be tested, reinforced, and continually improved. Lucy Letby's crimes shook the medical community and the nation to its core. The image of a caring nurse, one who should embody comfort and healing, was shattered. Her actions serve as a sobering reminder that harm can sometimes originate from the least expected sources. As families, medical professionals, and the public move forward, the lessons from this case must not be forgotten. They must serve as a call to action, to protect the vulnerable, uphold the integrity of healthcare systems, and ensure that such horrors are never allowed to happen again.